The Starkville Board of Alderman is brought to you by Oktibbeha County Hospital, devoted to your health.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your health care needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in health care.
May 17, 2005 recess meeting of the Starkville Mayor and Board of Alderman is called to order. In addition to the printed agenda that's been made available to you, there are 2 or 3 amendments that we need to recommend. One is under Roman numeral 8B. National Guard Armory, and Roman numeral 10A4 pertaining to sanitation needs to be deleted. That is premature. We're not ready to discuss that tonight. And under executive session, we need to discuss possible acquisition of property. So I would ask for approval of this printed agenda with these recommended amendments.
I move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Second. Motion second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it's so ordered. I'll ask now that we stand together for an invocation, silent invocation, and then remain standing for a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Will you bow with me? Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item has to do with the public hearing to consider a proposed comprehensive plan, and we will recognize Ms. Shelley Johnston for that presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to be sort of addressing you guys in the public tonight as it's a public hearing, and we talked before about this. For those of you who recognize me, I'm Shelley Johnston. I started working on the comprehensive plan for the city of Starkville last February 9th, and so we've been at this probably for about 13, 14 months on getting the plan prepared for the city. It's always good, I think, to go back to the beginning to talk about the process, because the process is part of it. This is part of the outcome tonight, but the process is very important. old age. As I mentioned, there was input from the public at the ward meetings, input from the key stakeholders and public officials. The need for a different vision in the new economy, that's what I mentioned before. I don't know how many of you are familiar with asset-based development as opposed to what's called the buffalo hunt or the hunt for the smokestack. The economy has changed dramatically, it will continue to change, and asset-based development is incredibly important right now. So that's one thing that when I was looking at economic development issues for the community, we looked at what kind of assets would help support the product so that we could sell the community. And also analysis based upon the goal of being the best community Starkville can be, the destination of choice for businesses, residents, visitors, and students. Some of the common threads throughout the board meetings, the number one thread was enforce the existing ordinances. Heard that at every single board meeting. People wanted to know what kind of ordinances there were. We went over that in some of the board meetings and how they could be enforced. The city has been through some ups and downs in terms of staff and having planners on board and not on board and other planners and then not. And I think that's been primarily the reason for lack of enforcement of the ordinances. So that was one of the major things that was said. Also, people said, you know, where it's lacking, get new and better ordinances. So there's recommendations for that. A lot of people said improve the relationship between the university and the city. And then about half the people said it was improved. So that was good news, that over the years that the relationship had improved. Many people talked about sidewalks, about requiring sidewalks in new development, about the city putting sidewalks in to fill in the spots. This community, you're a university community. Mississippi State University has taken on the role of becoming a more walkable, more bikeable community. And you have students, you've got an incredibly young population, some 10 years on average younger than the state of Mississippi. And then you've got a lot of older folks like me who like to walk. A lot of people like to walk. And they don't, not just for exercise, but for transportation. So that came through loud and clear that people wanted Starkville to be a more walkable community, a more bikeable community. We identified some problems with students living in single-family areas, did a separate study which related to the moratorium on multifamily developments right now and covered that issue kind of as a side issue to the moratorium discussion about what to do about that. I looked at many colleges throughout the United States. Some dealt with behavioral issues, some dealt with zoning and trying to isolate students in certain parts of the city, although you can't force someone to live in a certain place, but to make it desirable for them to do that, and that's still under review, and I have recommendations in the plan for that. Many people reluctantly hated to stand up and say they thought that Starkville was an unattractive city physically. And most everybody opened that by saying, this place has great people, wonderful people, warm people, friendly people. And I said, that's great, because I'd hate to have to be solving the other problem. To have a beautiful city and a bunch of people who aren't very nice, that's not good. But the problem with being an unattractive city is that when people come through, they often only get that one chance. That one chance, that first impression, to make a decision about whether they're going to stop in Starkville or whether they're going to go on. Whether they're going to live in Starkville or go on. Or come to school in Starkville or go on to the next school. Or put their business or industry here. So it would be nice that if we could have them knock on the doors of people and get to meet everybody and learn how nice everybody is, and I've learned that throughout the year. This is a wonderful community, and that's absolutely true. But those people often don't have a chance to do that. So they're going to make their impression when they drive through. So that's an important thing. Use resources at the university. It's amazing to me what you've got here at Mississippi State University. It's absolutely amazing, particularly in terms of how they can help with planning issues. You've actually got, he won't like you saying this, you actually got a PhD planner who's on staff in the public administration. I don't know, is it called public administration?
Public policy,
Public
yeah.
policy department. And you've got landscape architecture students and professors. You've got architecture students and professors. You've got a wealth of knowledge and probably less expensive help too. The students have done just an incredible job from what I've seen. They did a plan for downtown. It's a little grandiose, but they're supposed to do that. They're supposed to think big and think into the future, and it really is very, very nice. They did a good job. Too many apartments. That's been said ever since I got here. I've heard people talk about the glut of apartments. When I did the study, I didn't just look at multiple family. I looked at rental as its own category, because you've got multiple family attached apartments, and that's what people think about. But I've had lots of people explain to me about multiple family uses that I knew technically were single family subdivisions, but they were being rented, and primarily by students. So instead of just looking at apartments in general, we looked at rental across the board, including those in single family subdivisions developed for that, and also in neighborhoods already established. Heard a lot of comments about the Chamber of Commerce being more visible and accessible. It was kind of an emotional issue at some of the meetings. People thought it was a symbolic issue, for one thing, that it was not located in the central core of the community, and also a logistical issue, just people trying to find it and that kind of thing. And I passed that on the next day after the meetings were over to the folks out there to let them know so that they were aware of what was being said. Also, comments to make ordinances more available, easier to use, using the website to publicize those ordinances and have them, and we started doing that. About 6 months into the plan, I did what I call an immediate action plan. It's a 17-point process that I call it the 8 o'clock next morning list. Things you could do that I had learned that we could just do. We didn't have to study to death anymore, just stuff to do. One of those was to enforce the landscape ordinance that had been adopted in 1999. And the others were to begin to put some of the ordinances on the website. Some of that had already been done, and also to begin to make the process a little easier to navigate. For those of you who frequent the building and planning department, this is what you do on a regular basis, you'll be happy to know that the plans are actually, that it's already done and under consideration with the Planning Commission to have a development code that is a lot easier to navigate. In fact, it does have a front page that identifies how you go about finding what ordinances and what parts of ordinances apply to your project. So there's not any question. You find your zone on the map and you go to that particular place in the zoning ordinance, and it will outline for you exactly everything that you need. What ordinance, what other ordinance, or what other article in that ordinance you need to look at depending on what your project is doing. So that was a very good comment, and one that we took to heart in terms of trying to make it easier to navigate the process. Too many empty buildings. Absolutely. In doing my study of the community, found there to be an inordinate number of empty buildings. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it has to do with the economy, some of it has to do with just too much development prematurely in some places. But I heard an excellent idea the other day for what to do with empty buildings in the meantime, so that one reason that they don't get leased or sold is because they're empty. That's part of the problem. Very similar when you try to sell your house and you take everything out of it, it's a lot harder to sell because you have your things in there. This is actually happening in Manhattan, New York, which I think is interesting. I'm sure it has some issues, but they're letting artists use the buildings as places to display their artwork. So you might want to do that. Until the building gets leased. So it has some life to it. People that are in it are taking care of it, and that's maybe a way to help draw people to do that. Again, I'm trying to usually put the marketing cap on to see what can be done to solve that problem, because that creates an awful lot of issues in the community. Another thing is people said that festivals and other activities in the community were good, and that's true. That's part of that asset-based development. People come into the community, they've got money, they've got some leisure time, and they come in and spend their money, and the idea, the next step is then value added. What other thing can we have them stay for? So they stay an extra day. And stay an extra day. They come to a ball game. Let's get them here to stay an extra day. So that they spend their money in the community. Manufacturing's never been a strong sector in Untitled County. Hopefully there still will continue to be gains made in manufacturing in this community, but This nation and this state has lost an awful lot of manufacturing jobs in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's not a good idea to go totally back to the bank with that, although you've had some excellent things happen in the neighboring community that will have spillover effect in Starkville. So that's good. That's good regionalism. The top issues facing Starkville today, according to the Mayor and Board of Alderman and the Planning and Zoning Commission, are adequate streets, irresponsible poor development, lack of planning, adequate city funding. This city has one of the lowest millage rates of any community, certainly of its size, in the community. I think I'm going to be able to fix this so that you guys can read it. I'm not going to try to. Then attributes that make the Starkville a great place to live. Of course, everybody mentioned Mississippi State University. And when I first came here, and I had some individual conversations with people, they say, you're going to hear people talk about that this is not a college town. And they don't want to be mistaken for a college town. But in every board meeting, we heard that as a positive. Did not hear the only negative thing was about this students living in single family areas, but very positive. Good schools and friendly and good people. Those are most positive changes over the last 10 years. Downtown improvements were mentioned by not only the mayor and board and the planning commission, but also by the people at the ward meetings. Better coordination among city, county, and the university. Economic development, the annexation was mentioned, the bypass or perimeter road development possibilities, and medical and health opportunities with Oktibbeha County Hospital, and the sportsplex. Changes over the 10 years that concerned the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Mayor and Board of Alderman the most was the plethora of rental units and apartments, including cheaply built rental property, and lack of planning and disorderly development. Those were the major concerns. Types of development the city should encourage, and this is right on target. Both the Planning Commission and the Mayor and Board are following right along with what's being recommended nationwide. High-tech research and skilled labor industries, protection of single-family neighborhoods, and orderly development and ordinances that keep up with the growth. Types of development that should be discouraged: low-quality cookie cutter, mass production, rentals, and high-density apartments, conversion of single-family homes into rentals. That's a problem in almost every college community. Strip malls, as opposed to things like lifestyle centers, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Large minimum wage factories, there aren't many of those left anyway. Small single-family units, there's been a problem with that in this community. And adjacent incompatible uses without, I guess that's sufficient. Let's see if I can, since I don't have that totally memorized, see if I can find it. It is in my computer. I appreciate whoever said that. It's in the screen. This way. That's okay with you guys. Without sufficient buffers. Sorry. Okay. Also, quality of new development. When we asked them about the quality of new development, most said poor on both the mayor and board and the planning commission. Value of existing minimum site design criteria. Most said that was fair. Should the city establish additional site design and architectural review? All the respondents said yes. Rating of public services, roads, most said fair. Water, most said good. Sewer, most said good. Police, most said good. And fire, most said good. Drainage, most said fair. And I've been, like I said, been here a little over a year and sat in some of the planning commission and the board meetings, and I've heard lots of comments about drainage, and we've addressed drainage to a large degree in the plan. Administrative, most said good, and schools, most said good. As I mentioned before, this plan is based upon the facts of the new economy. If I were giving you some information about the older economy, I would tell you to add another 350 acres of land for manufacturing development. That would mean I didn't do my homework and didn't pay attention, because that's not where it's going. But the new economy, and you'll see in terms of information from people like Appalachian Regional Commission and Economic Development Administration and others, are really putting a large emphasis on asset-based development. And what that means is you take what you have that's good, and you tell people about it, and you make it better. That's I don't know how else to explain it except that. You figure out what you've got going for you. And it can be an amazingly small thing. I understand that 389, JW, I think you and I talked about this, is a tremendous draw for bicyclists. They love the route. Like nationwide, people know it. It's a great place to come and ride a bike. And you might think, well, what's that? Well, that's a lot. That's people staying in hotels, that's restaurants, that's people shopping in local stores. It's a big thing. Tourism is an incredible thing to use and use your assets to have people come in and spend their money. It's generally a pretty clean business, and it helps the community. And also, in terms of what the city needs in terms of funds, as you know, in Mississippi, the sales tax is the primary source of revenue for the general fund for most communities, upwards around 60% or more for most communities. So cities are very attuned to that need to have people come in and spend their money. It helps with things like parks and roads and other city activities. So it's good all the way around. One thing that I mentioned here, and why I have pushed the idea of design control so strongly, is that a community must be attractive to capitalize on this sector of the economy. You have to be. There's really not any other way around it, because people are drawn to places they like to visit and like to live. Many people today get on the internet and find a place to live, and then they find a job. That is completely different from what my parents did, probably most of your parents did, and maybe even some of your peers, depending on your age. But the Census Bureau notes that when people make changes, particularly people that have higher incomes, when they make changes in location, they tend to make it for lifestyle reasons. Poorer people tend to move because of jobs, but people with higher incomes tend to make lifestyle choice changes. That can be going to a place that they like because it's close to a resort area. It could be because they need to be home to take care of their aging parents. Those are all lifestyle choices. But a lot of people have no choice today about where they're going. Manufacturing is still going to have an important role, but again, you have to pay attention to the aesthetics of the parks, because manufacturing is changing. You've got Eurocopter and Steel Corps over in Lowndes County, and those Tier 1 supplier groups that are going to be doing supplies to those are some of those European countries, or current European countries, and their parks, industrial parks, look a lot different than our industrial parks. The Community Development Foundation in Tupelo has recognized this already in terms of what they're doing in locating people, and they have a program now to clean up their industrial parks, landscape, fix up the buildings, make it much more attractive to be in there because of the interest of these people. They want them to choose them. So there's no place to dump anything. Everybody wants a much more attractive place. It's also part, as I mentioned before, part of this huge group of people called baby boomers. There's 76 million of those in the United States. I'm right smack in the middle at 50. And we have grown up with a different attitude about what we want. And we like things nice. That's just the way we are. And the ones coming behind us aren't any different, because they're spoiled rotten. And they really want things nice. But our group is kind of the first group of people to have this expectation. We're a television demographic bubble, and we're used to nice things and want nice things. So you'll find that people will make choices about you based on that. Employment in the medical field will be strong. That's where you're going to find the biggest growth in employment in the community. You are lucky to have a hospital here, and a good hospital. So that's good. You'll see some strategies in the plan to deal with that growth. The Buniac factor has has to do with the fact that you're a university community. This comes from Rich Carlgard, he's the editor of Forbes. Wrote a book called Life 2.0 and also some articles in Forbes magazine about the Booniac factor. And it's a very interesting book. And because you have a university in your community, you are definitely one of the types of communities that people will choose because of the resources. 46% of the folks here have a bachelor's degree or more. That is amazing, particularly in communities in Mississippi. And you don't have to go to a job anymore. You can work out of your home. You can work from your computer. And so what people are looking for is brain power. They're looking for brain power, so they're going to university communities. And they're moving out of San Francisco and they're going to Sacramento. And they're moving out of eastern cities that are way too expensive from a housing standpoint and from a rent standpoint for businesses, and they're moving inland. There's a great story in there about a guy in North Dakota that started a little computer company and sold it to Microsoft. He's in Fargo, North Dakota. There's nothing in Fargo except a lot of snow and a lot of cold up there, but they said this is the place we want to be, and he's running that company there in Fargo, North Dakota. University provides good opportunity for research-related businesses, and certainly corporate headquarters would be another great thing for the community to try to get here. You've got, I've said this before, and no matter what I'm doing in terms of marketing, whether it's a business or a community, everybody is invited to come and live in a community. And you who own businesses, everybody's invited to come to your business. But who you want to target and who you want to market to come to your business are the people who can help the folks who can't. So it's just like our problems with the Social Security system that you keep hearing talking about now, that everybody had less and less kids, so there's fewer and fewer people to support in the future. That's very, very true about marketing your community. If you stopped a poor person on the street, you'd say, would you rather have more poor people or more rich people? And they were golly, people that have means have time to volunteer for Big Brothers Big Sisters, Habitat. They can pay taxes, not a whole lot of complaints. They've got money to spend in the community. So that's where your marketing is, and you help to support the people who can't. And more that's going to be older people in the community as the population ages. I used a good business model in city government because I kind of of the idea that cities should act more like businesses. And one of those things is find the best people, first who, then what. This is from a wonderful book called Good to Great. Confront the brutal facts. In other words, don't try to sweep it under the rug. Well, we're just not going to look at the fact that XYZ over here. We're just going to go on because I love Starkville, and it's a great community, and it is, and that's why I say never lose the faith and always have pride in your community, but don't ever be afraid to face the facts and the brutal facts and what you need to do to make change. A lot of people didn't do that, a lot of corporations didn't do that. I remember when Sears was the word that you said, not Walmart. Because when I was growing up, everything happened from Sears, now it happens from Walmart. Set goals for what drives your success. That might be the fire insurance rating for the fire chief, or zero complaints in certain departments, or the crime index for Chief Lindley for it to go down, or the best college town in the SEC. Whatever you want to set it as those goals. Also have a culture of passion for meeting goals in staff, planning and zoning commission. Eliminate heavy bureaucracy. And set some numerical goals, for example, for getting rid of dilapidated housing, or for making sure that weeds are cut in laws. And the legislature did us a great favor in passing a law now that's going to help with that. And also use technology to make processes better, and we're working on doing that. So the recommendations on enforcing existing regulations, and I hope you'll see that I've tried to create a thread from the comments to the policies, without losing that thread. So we didn't just go off somewhere here and grab a policy and say, oh, that's a good idea. It's based on what people said. First of all, I was asked last year at Rotary, should the city hire a city planner? And I said, I don't know. And I didn't know. That was in February of last year. I do know now, and yes, I think the city should hire a city planner. I think that's necessary. The recommendations that I'm making to the city are going to require someone with a background and expertise in planning to enforce the regulations and to administer them. So I'm recommending that to the city. Also recommending adding a part-time uniformed officer for code enforcement. I think as the city continues to grow, it's going to need more code enforcement officers, and I think having a uniformed officer is helpful. It adds some seriousness to what code enforcement is. Many communities are doing this, not necessarily having a full-time person in a smaller town, but at least a part-time person. As I mentioned before, set goals and measurable objectives and meet them. Improve training for staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Mayor and Board of Alderman. I also think that the city should join the American Planning Association so that the Mayor and Board and the Planning Commission can get training, regular training from these organizations. Increase fees to help offset costs of additional staff and training. I'm going to be recommending some additional registration and licensing, like for rental property, so there could be some. There's lots of discussion about dilapidated rental units, and also discussions about definition of a family, how we decide how many people are living in a rental place in a single-family neighborhood. So this will help with that. Keep a tickler file for things. It's hard to keep up sometimes. It's easy for things to get away from you. Home occupations, conditional uses that have to be reapproved annually. Eliminate the Board of Adjustment. I think the Planning and Zoning Commission can issue the variances and handle the other duties. And they are not just a zoning commission. In some communities, that's what they do. But in this community, they are charged with doing the planning and the zoning. And I think it's essential that one group do all of that so that they understand the workings. If it gets to be too much at a later point in time, then they certainly can reconstitute the board to do that. Get new and better regulations. I'm recommending that the city adopts historic preservation enabling legislation. I'm not making any recommendations right now for what kinds of preservation goals and standards there ought to be. The commission should do that, and not me. You've got some people in the community that are very good at that, and I think this has actually been tried before, but I'm recommending that the city do enact the enabling legislation that would set up the community. We would go from there. You've got wonderful, wonderful historic properties. They need to be preserved. They need to be saved. They are part of your assets. Very, very important part of your assets. I'll tell a story on my newly adopted hometown of Oxford. I've only been there since September, but there was a story in the paper, and Robbie, I think it may have been in the journal. I think maybe one of the first things Jennifer wrote when she got back from Iraq, but there was a house, and I happen to know the owners of the house just by a friend, that was appraised 7 years ago at $65,000. It just sold for $700,000. It's on South Lamar. It's not a big, beautiful antebellum house. It's a French-style house in the community, but there has been an idea to preserve the residential areas around the square, and they've done that. And of course, Oxford just passed historic preservation, but they've had people very interested in preserving those. So it can be good for the community to do that, because there's not many of those left. Kind of like diamonds, they're expensive because they're rare. And you've got some beautiful, beautiful, I think even much prettier homes than are in Oxford. Very, very pretty homes here that should be preserved. Of course, I'm recommending adopting design guidelines and incorporating those into the landscape ordinance. I think that's incredibly important, not just for certain areas of the community, not just for historic areas, but for everywhere in the community, so that however people come to see you and to visit you, they get a very attractive view when they come. Improve the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations. We're not making many changes in subdivision regulations. There are very few. Those are very technical. They're kind of engineering oriented, and there's just a very, very few suggestions that I'm making for the subdivision regulations. The drainage improvements will come primarily in the requirements for the development plan for the design and landscape controls. And there are some pretty stringent requirements in there for drainage, but there's been a lot of problems in this community And you've heard people come to this board and also to the planning commission to talk about those issues. And for lots of reasons, not just localized flooding. That's one reason to do it, because it's a pain and it bothers people and it gets into their homes, and that's not good. But also from the environmental standpoint. Starkville will be coming under new guidelines soon for pollution control. And so I'm recommending that the city begin, particularly due to the education efforts that it takes to go by those guidelines. Sidewalks should be required for all new construction, residential and otherwise. Those are located in the design controls and also the subdivision regulations. And the definition of subdivision should include any subdivision of land. Too many loopholes to get out of that. And the subdivision regulations are your basic. That, people talk about zoning all the time, but it's not very sexy, but subdivision regulations are basic. That's where it starts. That's where raw land goes into development, and it's incredibly, incredibly important that subdivision regulations take care of any kind of subdivision. Get better new ordinances, again, specifically with regard to zoning, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some map changes, but mostly about text changes. You have an amazing place here, and as I looked at it, it kind of almost looked like the Mississippi Delta there as it came down to meet the entrance of Mississippi State University. But your central business district has undergone an incredible renaissance. It used to be completely dead. I remember coming down here years ago, and it was just a ghost town. And now it's lively and interesting. There are shops and restaurants and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, here's a good idea. We'll just expand it. The one thing that's nice about the Central Business District is it's the original mixed-use development. I know a lot of you are hearing a lot about traditional neighborhood development, about Seaside and Harbor Town and the Kentlands and Gaithersburg, Maryland. These are all traditional neighborhood developments, and kind of harkening back to the days before World War II, when people sat out on the front porches and spoke to each other, and a little closer to the street and not so far back and not so isolated from the community. So my vision, and what I explained to the planning commission, is I just saw this as being this huge asset for the community. Seeing mixed developments, having residential development, and we jokingly call it the legalization of the cotton district, but it's very much like this award-winning community that you already have in Starkville. And having offices on second floors, homes on third floors, retail establishments, a lot of vitality in the community, a lot of energy in the community, sidewalks and bike paths, and people everywhere. Buying things and having fun and enjoying football games and coming back and going to restaurants and outdoor cafes, and that's the kind of vision that I saw for this area, and I thought it ought to be bigger rather than the separate zoning categories. In about 10 years, you may or may not hear this, but zoning is going to slowly start to go away, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're going to see a lot more mixed developments, but with lots and lots of